When I was in law school, I had this professor who said that being a lawyer was like having a front row ticket to the circus of human life. And I agreed with him until I got into multifamily residential. And I realized that's really where the front row is.
Welcome to the Fueling Deals Podcast, the podcast that teaches how to accelerate your business growth through all types of deals. It's time to fuel up, so buckle in with your host, Corey Kupfer.
There are only two ways to grow your business: organically through sales and marketing and providing great products and services, and inorganically through deals. Too many companies focus only on the first way, organic growth. Welcome to the podcast, which will help accelerate your business growth inorganically. My guests are a huge variety of deal makers and experts on all types of deals who have personal experience that can help you grow, get clear, learn best practices, and avoid mistakes. We discuss everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My guest today is Jeff Holst. Jeff is a recovering attorney who spends his time as a real estate investor. He graduated early with honors from Michigan State College of Law, where he was the graduating class speaker. He also holds an M.B.A. At 30 years old, Jeff checked the last item off his personal bucket list by climbing Machu Picchu. He was on top of the world. Literally, it sounds like, right? He stood looking down at the lost Incan city. He had been living the life of his dreams. He was well-traveled, had previously visited the pyramids in Egypt, climbed to the top of Mt Sinai, swam with sharks in Belize, and backpacked alone around Europe. He was married to the girl of his dreams. He had a beautiful house in the suburbs and a thriving law practice. 2 weeks later, he was in the hospital dying. His business was in disarray. His wife was barely holding it together, and he was on his way to bankruptcy. Well, listen, I'm gonna leave the part out of his bio that talks about his comeback because I want to hear that from him. And we'll talk about what he's doing now. But he's also the co-host of a show of a podcast that I watched several episodes recently, and it's really a lot of fun, called the Old Fashioned Real Estate Show, where he hosts the show and drinks bourbon old fashions, which is my drink when I'm not doing wine, and talks about real estate. So he and I definitely need to get a drink soon. But for now, it's great to have you on the podcast, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, excellent. So let's. I definitely want to, sort of tease what you're doing now. We'll get there, but before we do that, let's go back even before the law practice and the life-changing event, and bring you back to when you were a little kid. What is it that you wanted to be when you grew up? Was it anything to do with a lawyer or real estate investor, or at 8, 10, 12 years old, was it something else?
I think it probably actually was. I wanted to be a lawyer and real estate investor, which sounds kind of crazy when you think about it. But I modeled after my dad. I think most people do that when they're young. They pick one of their parents and model after them. My dad was a lawyer. He had some rental properties, and I think I just sort of had that in my head. Plus, I saw late night television shows of people living in Miami with by the pool drinking cocktails or whatever. I was probably a little older than 8 or 9 when I saw those, but it just sounded like a good way to live.
I love that. And, and I don't know if this would surprise you or not. It may not, but, out of probably, 35 or 40 episodes that I've recorded on this show and asked that question, you may only be the second person who is actually doing what they thought they might be doing as a little kid.
Well, I definitely didn't think I was going to be a podcast host. So, I think you asked David Bach that in one of your episodes. Or no, it wasn't David Bach. It was one of the other episodes. You asked a host that if that was what his dream was. And I don't think that wasn't my plan. So.
Yeah. Well, I think we just recently released David Shrine-Khan's episode, and I remember asking him that, and he said, and I said, I joked that podcasts didn't even exist back then, and he did point out, well, there were radio shows and podcasts are sort of a version of that, but yes,
that's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was your first real business, however you define that?
I did a lot of things. Like when I was a kid, I would sell. They had these things we call them slap bracelets. They were like a little.
Oh yeah.
You remember those? So there was a girl at this middle school I was at that her dad worked at some kind of novelty store and could buy them for bulk, and I would buy them for her for like $1 and sell them to my neighborhood kids and friends that didn't go to our school for $2. So that was probably my first real business. I think I made about $40 over a course of 2 weeks.
I love it. I love it. Love it. So, so let's talk about. So you had all these amazing experiences, and I'll tell you, you're a man after my own heart because I loved. I got back from Nepal. About from when we're recording this about a month ago. By the time this airs, it'll be several months older. But did some trekking out there. We took a helicopter ride to Base Camp Everest, and so a lot of the experiences in your bio really appealed to me. So you had all this adventure. You had a good thing going to a law firm, and then what happened?
Well, I got sick. I mean, I had I was actually in Machu Picchu, like it said in my bio, and I just had one other attorney working for me at the time, and I got a voicemail from him one day that said he was quitting, and I was in South America at the time, and that was kind of inconvenient. And then I got back. We'd actually went into the Amazon and did a little swimming in the river, which is actually not that smart because of the piranhas and stuff, but it was a lot of fun. But we went down there, and then I got back home and I wasn't feeling well, and I thought I'd maybe picked up a parasite or something, but it turned out it was actually a fairly advanced case of leukemia that they said I probably had for 4 or 5 years. I was young and dumb and not going to the doctor enough at that point in my life. So
wow. So that was obviously a life-altering experience, and talk a little bit how that led you into doing what you're doing now, which is the more of the real estate investing side, but no longer practicing law, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was challenging. I mean, I had a law firm, and it was that time we were spending about $4,000 or $5,000 a week to keep the doors open, and I had one attorney leave, like I'd said, and then I couldn't work, so we were basically, having to hire, supplemental people to get the cases wrapped up and stuff, and I ended up with a big pile of debt, and ended up filing personal bankruptcy about a year or so later. And that was pretty tough because I'd been doing mostly bankruptcy work. So it's like you go in front of your colleagues, right, and say, "Hey guys, I'm bankrupt." I mean, most people are pretty supportive because they knew what I was going through. But after that, I was like, man, I need to do something else. So, and I didn't ever want to be in that position again, right? I want to do something where I could control my income. And if I didn't show up to work, I'd still get paid. And that's kind of the impetus behind getting into real estate.
Great. So I'd love to hear more about what you're doing specifically, but also in the context of, for my audience on Fueling Deals is, there's at least two sort of possibilities where people might have interest, right? One, we do have some people who are in the real estate business and, and professional investors or, doing flips, rehabs, whatever it is. But a lot of my, more of my listeners and more of my clients are business people. And so some of them may want to make a change like you did. But also, I know many of them who are interested in getting into, some aspects of real estate as, sort of on the side or as a part-time thing, as a way to diversify. So with that in mind, talk to me a little bit about what you do, what you see in the industry, what the opportunity is out there for others.
Sure. I'm happy to do that. So, what I do specifically now is mostly residential, multifamily real estate. I do have a couple of commercial buildings as well, but I'm really I'm long on the residential stuff. That's the B and C class, kind of the the middle tier multifamily, low to medium income housing. And the reason we got into that is really because it's a cash flow play. It's a thing where people are going to need a place to live. And we feel like it's something that they're going to need for a long period of time. So if I were looking to invest passively in real estate, I would definitely look for people that are putting together those kind of deals. And there's a myriad of people online that are selling, smaller interests in larger deals. And we do a little bit of that as well. But that's the kind of thing I would be looking for, I think, if I was going to invest passively in real estate, especially if I was doing it on the side, because buying like a duplex or something you got to be ready to take calls at 3 a.m. when someone's water line breaks or whatever else might happen.
So you are also managing the buildings. You're not outsourcing that to a professional management company, outside professional management company.
Yeah. So it depends on the property. I mean, the ones that are by me, I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So the stuff down here, I do manage some of that. myself. I have a partner up in Michigan who owns a professional property management company. We use his services for the properties that we have up there. And I actually have a partner now in Chattanooga, and my partner in the real estate show that we have. He also owns a property management company. So I think there's a little bit of a trend there. I think I kind of like to tie in with property managers so I can let them do the hard work.
Well, it's such having represent, I do represent some real estate investors and clients, and that kind of stuff. And also, there was a time where I had a couple of funds where we put together money and invested in some, B properties as well, multis like you do. And I'll tell you, you learn quickly that, either you or somebody's, an outside company, whoever it is, needs to really have experience, because there's a lot that comes up in managing multifamily residential property.
No, yeah, no doubt about that. It's actually when I was in law school, I had this professor who said that being a lawyer was like having a front row ticket to the circus of human life. And I agreed with him until I got into multifamily residential. And I realized that's really where the front row is. So
I love it. So what is some of the, so for somebody who's looking to get into this, or, in your experience, what are some of the challenges that do come up, whether it's with tenants, whether it's with figuring out how to, find the right deals or structure the right deals? What are some of the challenges that come up, and, what are some of the tips on how to do it right?
Yeah. So, the challenges depend a little bit on where you are in the market cycle. And right now, I think we're fairly late in the market cycle. Certainly not in 2010 anymore, where, you could pretty much throw a stone and hit a good deal. Now you have to really have to dig in. So the challenge now is finding the right properties and the right deals, of course, and then identifying what the current owners are doing wrong. Because at the end of the day, it's pretty much basic economics. People understand that if they raise rent and keep costs down, they're going to do well. So if it's real easy, it's going to be done already. So you got to understand what the weak points in the current management structure is, and then you also have to find deals where there actually are inefficiencies in the market.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, right at the place in the cycle we are now. And I'll one of the challenges that I had back in the day is that we raised our funds in 2006 and invested in 2007, 2008, and of course we all know what happened with the Great Recession. So we had different challenges, and so maybe I'll ask. We're not in one of those times now, but I don't know anybody who does this stuff who doesn't believe that we will at some point, we don't know whether it's 6 months or 6 years, but at some point there's going to be a downturn because everything runs in cycles. So how do you prepare yourself for that situation, and what are the challenges and opportunities then?
Yeah. So, what I've been doing is I've been thinking a lot about, like I said, cash flow is important, because at the end of the day, if you could buy stuff today in 2006 prices, you'd be real happy. So right. If you didn't have to sell in 2008, 9, or 10, and you didn't have to refinance during those times. So that's the other thing. We try to get longer term financing now than we might have 4 or 5 years ago. But if you didn't have to refinance and you had enough cash flow and cash reserves to continue paying your mortgage payments and keep your properties up, I think you can just ride it out. That's really the best strategy that you can have. Is just recognize that you got to stress test really, really well and make sure that you know what's going to happen if rents go down 10 or 15%. What does that look like? And even in 2007, 8, 9, 10, rents didn't really go down. They were pretty flat. The problem was most people were buying based on the fact that rents were going up, and they were modeling the stuff like, hey, rents are going to go up 10% a year or 5% a year. And I see people starting to do that now. It's not like 2006 yet, but we're going to get there eventually if people keep jumping into the market, and especially with newer operators jumping in.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. And it's interesting that, our experience was that we, most of our buildings in New York were easier, but we had made a play up in Lynn, Massachusetts, which was really a C building that was on the verge of becoming a B, and they had sort of the gentrification. That's not really the right word, because actually it wasn't gentrification, because the communities that were there stayed, which was nice. But the renovation and was moving out. Like they had done the downtown, and then the next circle was getting strong. We were right outside of that, and one of the challenges we ended up with is vacancies in that property. because a lot of people were from other places there, and they ended up, the economy was so bad, they ended up going back to their home countries because there weren't jobs. So we had vacancy issues. So that could be a challenge as well, depending on what market you're in, right?
For sure, yeah. And I think actually what you're talking about is something that that I spend a lot of time thinking about, is especially as we grow, you want to stick to markets you really know, because you might think, hey, it's not too far away, I can get there, I can check it out. But if you don't really have good people on the ground, and you don't really have a really understand that market, you can get yourself into trouble pretty quickly.
Yeah, no question. And we certainly learned that, because we did some really good deals in the New York area, and had more challenge, on that more distant deal that we did. So interesting. So let me ask you something about, do you, in terms of how you're financing your deals, are you raising outside capital? Are you self-funding? If you're raising outside capital, are you doing it on a deal-to-deal basis, or have you created any fund? How are you doing that?
Sure. So most of our stuff we've actually self-financed. We were fortunate. We bought a lot of stuff cheap during the recession, and mostly single-family homes, and we started converting those over to multis about 2 years ago. So the first several deals we did with the multis, we really were able to self-finance. Lately, we have been raising a little bit of outside funds. We've been doing that on a deal-to-deal basis. We've done that in the form of private money lending, and we've done that also in the form of investor groups. And it just depends on the deal. If we find the right deal, one thing is that if you're putting 20-30% down on deals over and over again, you're going to run out of money eventually. Doesn't matter how successful you are.
Right.
You keep doing deals, you're going to need to raise some money from somewhere. But there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of money on the sidelines right now that is making 1 or 2%. That people, you can present them an opportunity that's fairly conservative to make them 7 or 8, 9%, and they're excited to jump at that.
Yeah. So that leads me. So you mentioned those kind of numbers. So to the extent you're comfortable, talk to me a little bit about deal structure, and what kind of are they getting any kind of preferred return? How are you structuring your investment deals?
Yeah, sure. So it's very deal specific. So we're looking at the individual property, and we're kind of saying, hey, what makes sense for this property, and it's really about finding a return that's going to satisfy us on the entrepreneurial side, to make sure that we're protected, but also even more important than that, to make sure that the investor capital is protected. Because one thing we've always had as a philosophy is that if we wouldn't put our mom's deal in our mom's money, or like her last $10,000 in the deal, then we don't want to take any money on it. So if it's one thing to lose your own money, it's another thing to lose other people's. But sort of an aside there. But to answer your question, yeah, we've used preferred rates of return, and we've used kind of like reduced equity positions like waterfalls and things like that a couple times. But we really try to keep it simple right now, so it's understandable for the investor, so they can look at the deal and say, yeah, I understand what I'm getting paid and how I'm getting paid. And it's just going to be deal specific as to what that looks like.
Great. And you alluded to something that I'd love you to talk about, because it certainly was something that I experienced, and I've seen clients of mine who, some of them handle it really well, and some of them it's a big challenge, which is that I'll say, let's call it opportunity/burden of being responsible for other people's money, right? And there's a certain, listen, there are certain people out there, which I know you're not one of, and I'm certainly not, and I don't work with any clients who don't really care about the money they're raising for investors, and are willing to take whatever risk, and they don't care what happens to it. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the majority of us who are responsible people. There's a certain sort of mentality and a certain pressure when you take other people's money that some people deal with well and others don't. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually maybe some of my experience in law helped me with that a little bit, because you're often, practicing law, holding clients' money and things like that. And you just really have to think about what's in their best interest all the time. And you got to kind of make that your priority. And so, yeah, there's definitely pressure. And in one way, that's why we did a lot of the deals ourselves. Partly because they were, good deals, and we like to make money, and we had the money to do it. But also because there's something refreshing about using your own money. You can be more flexible with what you do. You can take more risk, I think, with your own money than you can with someone else's money. So there's some advantages to that. But to answer your question more directly, yeah, I mean, there's ton of pressure when you take someone's money to make sure that you're performing and to make sure that your projections are, in fact, in most cases, we're trying to make our projection, exceed our projections so that, they're extra happy with us.
Sure. And I've found that interestingly, that some of my clients find that they have trouble handling that. It's a tough thing for them, and some of them do well. I mean, it's definitely added pressure. And obviously, listen, when things are going well, the pressure's not so bad. When things get more challenging, that's when.
Yeah, I mean, and we've been pretty fortunate. I mean, we're in a good part in the market cycle, so we haven't had that, that challenge of things going very poorly, but I mean, we do spend a lot of time thinking about protecting the downside, and we try to craft our deals so that the investors have protection and our capital is more at risk than theirs.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about more about your model in terms of how you look at things. I mean, are you looking, obviously with the when you started out with more of the single families, it sounds like some of those were buying flips or I don't know if you're rehabbing those, but on the multis, are you more buy and hold, or are you more, buy, correct the management issues, bring the properties up to a snuff, increase the rent rolls and then sell, or is it a combination? What's the
model? We're pretty opportunistic about it. So it depends on the deal again, but most of what we're doing is buy and hold. This point in the market cycle, like I was saying before, we're preparing for a potential downturn, and our theory is if it pays for itself over a long period of time, we're okay with that. But when we're doing the investor deals, we're usually projecting a 5 to 7 year hold period with, lots of disclaimers saying that if the market cycle's at the wrong point, we're not going to sell in the bottom of the market. It just doesn't make sense to do it. So most of the stuff is buy and hold with a 5 or 7 year hold period. But when we're buying for ourselves, a lot of times we're looking at it and saying, hey, would I be comfortable owning this for the whole term, right? It could be 20 or 30 year amortizations on the loans. And in some cases, we've kind of decided that we wouldn't mind having it, that whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of the things that's always interesting to me about psychology, and I'm wondering whether it's tempted you to raise a fund now when things are good, is, I've seen it with clients. We certainly ran into it with our funds where, we actually, with the exception of that one property I talked about, we did some good buying. And then, in 2009, there were properties that we could, like comparable properties we could buy for 30-40% less. And those would have been phenomenal deals. I mean, the properties we had, have come back and done well and whatever, and and been able to, worth a lot more now than they were. We already sold them, but if we held them, but if we had bought them at 30 or 40% less, it would have been even more amazing. But because everybody was running scared and it was the recession or whatever, we had trouble raising additional money. So I know some of my clients in that area, that's one of the temptations to raise a fund, although, of course, you have some pressure sometimes to deploy that capital because it gets harder to raise capital on a deal-to-deal basis in a down economy a lot of times. Have you guys, what you thinking on that?
Well, I mean, we have talked about it internally, but the truth of the matter is I feel like it's so hard to time the market that it's dangerous to set money on the sidelines, which is why we're kind of trying to come up with the long-term philosophy of, buying stuff that we're comfortable keeping through a recession. That's not to say we wouldn't sell. We have a couple of properties we bought a few years ago that the equity positions have, tripled. And we feel like, it might be time to sell those and deploy that capital in a different way. But what we don't want to do is just sit on a pile of cash. I mean, we have to have adequate reserves, like I said, to prepare for a downturn, but and have some to buy some opportunistic might make some sense. But you have to have a lot of capital before it makes sense to park a big chunk of cash, because the truth is it's not like you just have to save the down payment. It's hard to get investors to put money in, but it's even harder, I think, to get banks to finance stuff during a recession and downturn, because banks are, like most big companies, overreact to the current situation because they have so much shareholder pressure.
Absolutely right. That's absolutely right. So let me bring it out a little bit to a level that will not only help our listeners who are doing deals in real estate, but are doing deals generally. So I want to talk to you a little bit about sort of the mindset of a deal maker. And and what makes somebody a good deal maker versus whether it's in real estate, whether it's in doing M&A or whatever it may be, right? Because I think a deal maker, yes, they're industry specific or investment type specific knowledge, but there's, in my mind at least, something about being a deal maker versus somebody who's not a deal maker. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do actually. I think anyone can probably learn to negotiate and things like that, and there are tons of books on that. But the sort of drive to go make deals is it's almost innate in people. Some people just like it. Some people can't stand it. I love making deals. Like, I mean, if I wasn't in real estate, and I was doing something else, I'd probably just be making deals. Like, I like the idea of just, brokering other people's deals. I like just, kind of, even sometimes I just think, well, if I was going to make this deal, how would I make it work, even if I'm not going to do it? It's just sort of how my brain works.
Yeah. And so what is it? Let's drill down a little bit more, because I hear some of the same excitement that I get. It's, for me, it's more, and let me know if I'm hearing the same thing in you. I think I'm hearing some of it. For me, it's more, it's not about conquering anything or ego or building stuff up. It's like, it's the strategy, it's the game of it. It's figuring out how to make it work. It's the puzzle of it that is a big part of it for me that excites me.
Yeah, no, it is a lot like a game, and it can be a lot of fun. And also, when I'm making deals, I'm usually looking at like, in order to make it work, you kind of have to make it work for both sides. So some people think of it like a war. I try to think of it more like a collaboration, right?
Yeah.
How do you figure out a way for both sides to come out ahead? I mean, in most negotiations, people always feel like, oh, I didn't do quite as well as I should have, but I mean, then that's sort of healthy, because if one side's super happy, then usually the other side's not very happy. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's just kind of fun, right? I mean, it's just kind of figuring out how to piece it together, and it could be something as simple as negotiating to buy the lot next to your house. Sometimes it's just like, there's so many intangible benefits to every kind of deal, and you just got to think about what makes sense.
So talk to me. So you have some partners, and you mentioned in these deals. And that's, that in itself is a deal, right? To be in any kind of business partnership, strategic alliance, whatever it is. So talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities, of being in business partnerships.
Yeah, so almost all my deals are partnerships, and different structures in each one. Now, being an attorney, maybe I have a little bit of oversensitivity to creating partnership agreements. Sometimes that might actually be, too much, right? So definitely you want to have your partnership agreements in writing. I'm not saying that, but sometimes you can overthink this stuff. So at some level, though, the most important thing I think for a partnership is that you both have to have an alignment of interest, or all three of you or five of you, however many it might be. You need to make sure that you understand what each person's role is going to be. And you also understand what the ultimate goals are. And then you need to have good communication. I've been very fortunate. I have two partners that I do quite a few deals with, and both of them are very good friends of mine. And some people have trouble working with friends, but we've been able to craft it in a way that works for us, and it's been really great because of that.
And is one of those partners the guy that you drink bourbon with in the morning while recording your podcast?
Yeah, well, we try not to admit that we film them in the mornings. I guess I shouldn't have told you that off air, but yeah, so it is. We do usually film them in the mornings and get drunk before noon. But yeah, well, that's one of my partners. And kind of funny story about him is his name is Brian Leverage. And so we use a lot of leverage, and I like to tell him that I use even more leverage, because I use him and I use financial leverage. So
I love it. You leverage.
That's right.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So I won't ask how much the bourbon old fashions help the partnership. I'll just make an assumption they do.
And it's funny, when we came up with the old fashioned real estate show, and we have a company, Old Fashioned Management, that we run as well. And we were trying to think of a name, and we were drinking old fashions, and that's really what it came down to. We were just sitting around at a steakhouse having a couple drinks, trying to think of what we wanted to do next, and that's where we came from it. So.
I love it. Well, only because it relates to bourbon old fashions. I'll give there's a friend of mine who actually has a great podcast. His name was Lou Diamond, and he has a podcast called Thrive Loud. It's all about how people thrive in life, and he's a fellow professional speaker with me. And he and I last year in July were at the NSA Influence conference in Dallas. And the hotel bar upstairs had smoky old fashions where they smoked them, right when they were making them. And boy, I haven't had a better smoky old fashioned than in a long time. So I'm looking. Lou and I were talking about this July. We'll be in Denver, and we're hoping to find some smoky old fashions. And we're both bourbon guys on the old fashions.
Right. Well, I was just in Denver at a multifamily conference last weekend, actually, and I did not find a good smoky old fashioned. So I wish you luck.
Okay. All right.
Hopefully you can do better than me. I found a couple of decent old fashions, but they weren't really excellent old fashions. So.
Oh, interesting. All right. Well, I'm going to do some meetings in Denver a couple of days before because I have some clients out there and other contacts. So maybe they can stand me right. And then the conference that I'm out is out at the Gaylord, the new Gaylord Resort, which is by the airport. So we'll see how they do. I don't know. I'll report back, listeners, on my old-fashioned journey in Denver.
Well, maybe if you get lucky, this episode will come out before you head to Denver, and then somebody will give you a few tips ahead of time.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, this is going to definitely come out later because we're running a few months behind. But who knows? Well, I'll see if I can find them. So, any last thoughts on just either ways to do deals right or big mistakes that people make, whether it's in deals in general or specifically in real estate?
Well, I think the biggest mistake that you can make is forcing a deal, right? I mean, like if a deal doesn't work, it doesn't work. And a lot of times, especially when the market's like it is now in real estate, people look at deals and they're just like, I need to be in something. I need to be buying something. And that can be that's how you get into 2006 buying, right? That's why you get that frenzy of buying that causes everyone to lose a pile of money. And you don't want to be in that situation.
Hey, no question. You're speaking my language. I mean, my whole framework in my authentic negotiating book is clarity, detachment, and equilibrium. And you're talking about detachment. The best deal makers I know are detached from the outcome. They come up with a clear set of objectives on what works for them, what doesn't work for them in the deal, and they're equally comfortable. I mean, they have a preference to get the deal done, but they're equally comfortable doing the deal or not doing the deal, depending upon whether it meets that set of criteria.
Well, I'm going to have to work on that because I always prefer to get the deal done. But I do try to step back from it and recognize that not every deal works.
Yeah. And listen, the way I always say it is that you should have a preference, right? Because why are you wasting your time if you don't have a preference? But ultimately, it either lines up or it doesn't. And if it doesn't make sense, then the smartest deal makers don't do it. So hopefully, it's interesting. There's a conversation I've been quoted in various deal industry press, more on the corporate side. I do stuff in the financial services space, and there's a lot of money coming into that space in terms of VC and private equity and family offices and all these people who are investing. And one of the things I always talk about in that space is deal discipline. When capital is available, and it's hard to maintain deal discipline sometimes, and that's when people make bad deals.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
So Jeff, before I ask you my last question here, where can people find out more about you if they want to check out you or your podcast or anything else you want to let them know about?
Sure. So the easiest way to get a hold of me is actually just to go to oldfashionedrealestate.com. And then you can check out the podcast from there as well, but it's just youtube.com/oldfashionedrealestate. So those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me. You can send me an email at jeff@oldfashionedrealestate.com. I think since there's a little bit of delay before the show comes out, my personal website will be back up and running. Then I'm redeveloping it right now. It's jeffreyholst.com.
Great. So Jeff, listen, I appreciate that. And folks, definitely listen, from what I've told the people we have in common, Jeff's doing some really, really good stuff. And whether it's in real estate investing or whether it's in finding, what you love after having some health challenges, I think you're an inspiration for a lot of people in that, Jeff. And so I appreciate you being on the show. I have one last question for you, which is The question I always ask last is about authenticity because it's one of my highest values. And for me, that is about alignment within a truth, like living a life that's aligned for us, coming from an internal place, because I believe that really the world, our lives in the world is manifest from within. So it's not about external expectation or morality, but it's about that alignment. And I'm wondering how that, what you think, how you view authenticity and how that plays into your life and your business and how you make deal decisions. I'd love to get your input on that.
Sure. So for me, the most important thing is to be doing what you believe, and especially when you're taking investor money, making sure that you're only positioning their money in a way that you have your own money positioned. But I mean, for me, like what we're doing with the show, the Old Fashioned Real Estate Show, is we're trying to give back because we've been very fortunate. I mean, I don't really have to put any more deals together. I can go sit on the beach and, drink Mai Tais or something. But I'll probably be old fashions if I was on the beach, honestly. But to be authentic to myself and to my values is to help other people achieve those kind of dreams themselves, whatever it might be. And even if it's not real estate, I have a real passion to help people find what it is that they want to do in life and be able to live it. I mean, I keep saying, in fact, I've been saying this over and over to people so much that I'll probably have a hashtag or something eventually, is that it's your last life right now. This is the last chance you have at being alive, and you have to live it like it is your last life ever.
So usually I end it there, but I'm tempted based upon what you said and your history. Do you have a next big adventure plan?
Yeah, actually, you were talking about Nepal at the beginning, and I was reading about hiking to Everest Base Camp, which is about a 2-week hike. So maybe taking a helicopter might have been. But our next big thing is in February, we're going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest point in Africa. So we're working on training for that right now. I just ran a 10K to get ready, and taking up swimming because apparently swimming helps with altitude a lot, the oxygen elements of altitude. So I'm just doing those things to get ready for climbing Mount Kilimanjaro.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's funny. I was just reading about the whole swimming thing as well, because we're doing one of the entrepreneurial groups I'm involved with, a bunch of former entrepreneurs organization members. We do a couple of retreats here. In fact, they were the guys I was in Nepal with, and it's a 12-day hike just to trek to base camp. So we were only going to be there for 12 days, so we took the helicopter, but we did end up trekking for about 4 or 5 days elsewhere. But in any case, there's a 18,000 foot mountain outside of Mexico City. I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, that it looks like we're going to be doing in February. And that's much higher altitude than we were at least trekking in Nepal. I was 22,000 feet in the helicopter, but I was reading about how they recommend swimming to get, especially if you can't train at altitude, to, start building up that VO2 max. So you and I may be doing some of the same training.
Yeah, well, and when you're in Denver in the summer, there's some opportunities to do some, 14,000 foot hikes and stuff like that. You might want to take a day to do that.
Yes, and I plan on doing that. In fact, I'm going to see a friend of mine, a good friend and client who I helped sell his company, who now lives in Breckenridge, and there's altitude there, and so I'm definitely going to take advantage of that. Well, this is great, Jeff. So I appreciate you coming on. I am excited about not only what you're doing in business, but these sort of this desire for adventure that you and I both have, and I'm sure we'll compare some notes as time goes on. I appreciate having you on the show.
No, I appreciate you having me. Thanks.
And thank you, Fueling Deals listeners, for tuning in. Remember, there's only one difference between companies that grow inorganically and those that don't, and it's unrelated to size, amount of capital, or any other factor. Other than that, the owners and executives of companies that do deals make a decision to do deals, and then they take action. Well, it's time to refuel. So until next week, Corey Kupfer signing out.
Thank you again for tuning in. Be sure to leave Fueling Deals a rating and review on iTunes and Google. Check out all our episodes at fuelingdeals.com to find out more resources to accelerate your business growth.